So we'll go back again and do.
Burned it.
It's here too close. So, you sure?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Burned it.
Do this again.
You gotta redo it.
Oh.
Got too close when we go. But we know it should be done now, though.
My name is Kris Villafane. I specialize in full color change wraps, not so much on the commercial side. And I got into it about a little over 4 years ago when I had just bought this Nissan Maxima. It was a 2016. And I was kind of getting into the show scene at that time. And I wanted to do something to make the car stand out, like change the color of it without tanking the value on trade or resale. At the time, there were three options. Doing a paint job, there was Plasti-Dip and vinyl wrap. And I chose to go with the vinyl wrap side. The first wrap was kind of self-taught, just watching YouTube videos and stuff like that. And then from there, it just turned into a bug. And then from a bug, it turned into a passion. So. She was just like, hey, I have this 1972 Lemans I want wrapped. How much? You know, he told me what he wanted to accomplish. One of his reasonings for even going, this is my first classic car. And the reason why I don't get them is because the classic cars, they're hardcore paint. They want these high-end paint jobs, these Concord paint jobs, some of them. Very few people are wrapping classic muscle cars. So his reasoning behind it was the paint shop was wanting an exorbitant amount of money and an extremely long amount of time. I think he was saying something like $15,000 and 6 months. And with the quote I gave him, it was only a few $1,000s, and I did it in 3 days. You know, he can get his car wrapped 4 or 5 times for that kind of money. So while Damon and I were going over the color samples, he started, asking a little bit about me. And when I told him I was prior military, that kind of piqued his interest some. He was like, hey, why don't we film you doing it? I had just booked a 2020 Supra wrap. So he was like, man, wouldn't it be cool if we filmed the differences of wrapping the old car versus the new car, having a brand new of the year, very popular car versus his 1972 classic muscle car. Both cars came out great, but there were certainly some bumps in the road with both cars. I joined the military in 2000. I was recruited out of the Newark, New Jersey station. But I was, at the time, I was living in the Bronx. I was a friend of a friend for a recruiter. I didn't even have my GED, so he was like, hey, you need a GED. So, and I was out of school for a number of years. I had dropped out, and I just went and walked into a school and took a test, and I passed, and then I did my ASVAB, and I was gone 11 days later. What I did in the military was aviation, so when I was at the MEP station and I was picking my job, the guy was like, what do you like? And I was like, oh, I like, working on things and fixing things. And, the typical heavy equipment mechanic stuff came up. And then he was like, hey, we got this helicopter mechanic. And I was like, oh, cool. That sounds cool. And I was like, how long is that training? He was like, it's 9 months. So it's like between basic and AIT, it would have been almost a whole year of school. And I was like, I don't think I can do that, man. Like, being yelled at by drill sergeants for a year. And I'll never forget this. He said, a year of training is a drop in the bucket for your career. And I was like, all right, I'll do it. With the prep in the Le Mans, it was unique because it was primered or primer sealed. So rather than clay barring a freshly painted surface, I had to feel the car and look at the car over checking for rust, primered spots. The sealer had a lot of, especially on the horizontal surfaces, a lot of like trash in the sealer, like little dots, specks. The doors, which were original, had rust, and then the grill piece had a lot of rust on it. The quarter and the trunk was like all brand new, so that was great. There was like no issues there. Some of the disassembly was a bit of a challenge. I've never disassembled an old car. So those metal bumpers looked heavy. So me and my dad, who assists, he had to help. And my dad's taken that stuff apart before. So it wasn't hard. It wasn't rocket science or nothing like that. It's just knowing where all the stuff is. It's not like a modern car where everything is kind of like just snapped together and then it's just some supporting screws. Like this stuff has big bolts holding everything up. For the 2020 Supra prep, it was pretty standard for pretty much every car when it comes to wrap. You wash, you clay bar, and then once it's washed and clay barred, we bring it into the garage. Looking at the car, I'll give it a once over, see what I plan on removing. What wasn't typical was the car comes with this factory like body kit of sorts. It has like these extended side flares, these extended rear flares, front flares. So I had to take all that apart. The car has a lot of sensors. It is, even though it has a Toyota badge, it is a BMW, pretty much inside and out. With that comes all the BMW sensors. It was a lot. If anybody's ever taken apart a BMW knows. We did have a struggle with the taillights. Those were a pain because there's one bolt that's very deep inside the hip of the car. You gotta like pop this whole thing out. It's like a royal pain in the ass. So one bolt is here, then one bolt is down here, and the other one is all the way in the back. This side is a lot easier because there's an access here, but this, you gotta pull this whole thing out. I spent 6 years in aviation working on Apache helicopters as a avionics armament electrical technician, or armament dog is what they call us. And I was actually in the very first Apache longbow training class, AH-64 Delta, very first one. While I was in aviation, I was in OAF 3, and I contracted meningitis while in Iraq. And they treated me with prednisone, which isn't a big deal, but it turns out that prednisone has a 2% chance to get the side effect of osteonecrosis. And I won the lottery with that one and ended up developing osteonecrosis in my left hip, and that led to me getting a total left hip replacement, which led to my medical retirement. So I only served 8 years in the Army, but I'm actually a retired staff sergeant. Fender, trunk, quarter panel, passenger door. Once the car is prepped, this Lemans, I had to plan out one particular panel. I had to come up with a plan, and that was the roof/quarter panel. Because on most modern cars, including the Supra and every other car I've wrapped, they're separate. So with the Lemans, it's one giant piece of metal. The whole roof and the quarter panels, it's all one piece of metal. And the wrap isn't that big to cover it all. So I had to plan out how I was gonna separate the two. What I chose to do was make it like a modern car, and I wrapped the roof first, and I used knifeless tape. I kind of just measured out what I thought would be a good location to put the seam. And then I did the roof first because I wanted the quarter panel join. When I joined the two panels together, I wanted that seam to face away from the view of the eye. So if you look up close enough, you'll see it seems there, but the average person might not even notice it. And when we had the Savage Rally, very few people even noticed the seam was there. Then from there, you know, we measure out each panel, and I decide how I'm going to cut down the film. So with the Lemans in particular, I knew the hood was going to be its own piece, the roof, the trunk, those were going to be its own piece, and also the fenders and the grille. But what I chose to do with the side of the car was I cut out the quarter panel, and from that quarter panel piece, I got the side rocker and the doors from that one big piece. So that one cut of film gave me 3 panels on each side. And then the fenders were their own, and the hood and the roof and the trunk were all their own pieces. Okay, super planning, as far as the wrap goes, was straightforward, just like any modern car. Everything is sectioned off, so you got your roof, hood, trunk, Your bumpers, what's unique about imports is that I can measure out the length of the bumper and then cut that piece in half lengthwise, because I haven't ran into a single import bumper yet that is above 30 inches. Because the film, and this is part of the planning, the film comes 60 inches tall. Pretty much every import I've ever wrapped, the height is under 30 inches. But on a domestic, like a Charger, it's taller. They're always taller. The fronts are really big. Camaros, Corvettes, Chargers, they're all huge, like 36-inch bumpers. Up, and the arrows facing back, and we'll just do that all around the car. Directional film is, this isn't an issue with solid color films, but any metallic is usually we consider directional. So if you take a film off the roll and let's say you cut it in half and you lay one panel on that horizontal way and then you take the other piece and turn it over or upside down, it'll look a slightly different shade in the sun or in different views. The Supra did have a challenge as far as planning goes, like the Lemans did, and that was both the quarter panels and the bumper and the hood. There was a big planning effort with that, because the Supra bumper is what we like to call a complex bumper. It has a lot of angular shapes, recesses, 90-degree bends in places or above 90-degree bends, and anywhere where there's a 90-degree bend or more, you want to put an inlay. So we had to plan out inlays. It was a mess. That front bumper is one of the most difficult bumpers to wrap on the market right now as far as wraps go. Quarter panels are extremely curvy. If anybody's ever wrapped a Porsche, they'll understand. It's like a Porsche on steroids. Anything that has excessive curvature is more difficult to wrap. And then the hood is currently the largest hood I've ever wrapped. And a funny story was when I wrapped the Lemans first. That hood was the largest, and right after the Supra, larger than the Lemans.
Does size count at all, or is that just some weird thing guys think about?
All right, you see, this is where Gene and I always get into a heated debate. I like them when they're really big.
And I think it's better when they're enormous.
And the reason why is because the Supras, if you ever seen an Audi R8 or a Mini Cooper, how the hood has like an over arch or over fender. Those cars don't have fenders. The hood goes over the top of the wheel. That gives you typically more length and more width, and then you have your curvature. So I think I cut out like 100 inches of vinyl just for the bumper, and that was just to cover the width of the bumper. It was still about 4 inches short lengthwise. Some advice I would have for people looking to get wraps, I would say do your research. Look at all your local wrap installers if there's more than one. Look at their reputation. I would say definitely talk to them in person, see what their shop looks like, look at samples. But it's really important to, on top of seeing their work, is to see what they know about the film and see what they're using to install the film. And I see this in the forums all the time. They'll be like, hey, what's the best material to use? And everybody will say 3M or Avery. And then they'll go, well, I got Vivid because it was a few bucks cheaper. And then they struggle because Vivid isn't exactly user-friendly depending on Vivid. I've wrapped with Vivid before. It's okay material. I don't sell it as far as customers go. I don't show it. I don't keep swatches of it. The reason being is because their film is primarily heat activated. So what happens is, in the climate here over time, that adhesive just gets hotter and hotter and hotter after multiple heat cycles in these hot summers. And when it comes time to pull it off, all the adhesive stays on the paint. Prep work's done, planning's done with the Lemans. After hashing out the roof and laying down all the material, 90% of the car was pretty easy. It was all flat. We did throw jams in there for Damon as well, not the door jams, but the quarter jams. Super easy, easiest jams I've ever done. The biggest challenge was the hood. With the hood being well, what do we measure? 3 or 4 inches, 6 inches short. We had to do a stretch. So from right here and heat it and stretch it, it'll discolor. You'll see a line. But when you do it across a whole panel like that, you can get a good amount of stretch. What we ended up doing was we took the stretch across the whole panel. You don't want to squeegee a quarter of the film and then stretch from there, because that's where we talk about film properties. It's going to discolor, especially on a matte metallic. So what we did was the Lemans has that kind of ridge, so I kind of used that as a reference point. I had that little kind of peaked ridge in the middle. And also the Lemans, it's flat, it's pretty much flat, and you got that grill that kind of meets up with it. So I was able to kind of like lay my film flat, and we pulled it across the whole panel, warming the whole entire panel, not just one area, the whole thing with my IR lamp. And I was able to take the stretch that I needed across the whole panel as opposed to just one small piece, and that allowed me to get all that stretch without discoloring it. And the results were amazing. When you look at the car, you never know that it was stretched to like 66 inches. It was pretty awesome doing it. Although it took a couple times to figure it out, well, we got it done. So we'll go back again and do.
Burned it.
We'll try again. The hood had these, you see in a lot of older cars, those grills, kind of like a grill that goes across the top, like near the windshield. There were 50 slots. 50 slots in that hood. 25 each side, 50. Oh man, I must have spent an hour per side. It was just very tedious. Wasn't hard, but tedious.
What sorcery is this?
So the Supra, even though it was almost half the size of the Lemans, it was way more curvier. We had way more man hours wrapping that car than the Lemans. I think with the Lemans, between prep and wrap, me and my dad assisting, we had a total of 24 man hours-ish over the course of 3 days. Because we did like 3 8-hour working days, and the Le Mans was done. Supra was a completely different story. That one we had closer to 5 or 6 days. Most of the car, if you count the number of panels on a car, I did most of the car myself, but the panels that I needed help on, namely the hood, I mean, we had 4 or 5 people at one point. We did the hood twice on the Supra. We did the trunk twice on the Supra. We did the bumper twice on the Supra, but that was only because of the material change, so I had some practice there. I mean, and once again, just going back to the curves, the planning, the inlays, and just the large size of the hood, I mean, that was the biggest challenge. I mean, you know, prep and cleaning and all that stuff was pretty straightforward. It was a much more challenge to wrap the vehicle versus the Lemans. The Lemans was all big flat panels. This thing was curvy panels all throughout. I'm really, when it comes to wraps, I'm as detailed as I can be, and the reason why, me personally, I want to be a good steward to the wrap industry. There's also a lot of local competition. We go to car meets. There's different people that wrap in the area. Wraps in general, people are just looking at. You know, you got a nice, cool color on your car that people know is not stock. They're gonna look at it. Wraps in particular, I like to say, is easy to get into. Anybody can go online and buy some film and try it out, and maybe they're okay at it, but it takes a little bit of, I would like to say it takes passion to master and get it to a point where it really does look like paint, and you don't have things like trash in the wrap, or, and these are industry terms, adhesive lines or adhesive dots, what we call in the film, and it takes a lot of time to learn the film's properties, have that detail and have that passion and have that effort that goes into making these wraps as perfect as possible. During my time, I had a passion for cars, but I could never afford to, you know, do stuff to them. When I got the news about my retirement, I told the doctor, you know, what am I gonna do when I get out? And I have no idea. I intended on doing 20 years. This year would have made 20 years for me. When I got out, I continued my aviation as a contractor, so I actually went back overseas as a civilian. I contracted at Fort Rucker, Fort Hood, Fort Bragg, a number of locations, and then I landed with an aerospace manufacturer here locally. From there is when the car stuff really took off for me. You know, starting out as, like I said, you know, with the car shows and just modding my personal vehicle, and it just became a passion. I get a lot of satisfaction seeing the change. When you have a car that's black or white and you make it red or chrome, or just completely changing the look from top to bottom of the vehicle, and then seeing the person's reaction and how happy they are, it's like you kind of, in a sense, make people's dreams come true. And that's what it is for me. It's just making that happen for people.